Welcome to my monthly Buddhist podcast, What's Your Favourite Cake? A podcast about how I use the daily practice of Nichiren Daishonin Buddhism in my life. This is my journey and how I use my Buddhist practice to enhance my life, but with the hope that I can inspire you on your journey too. What's Your Favourite Cake is available on Spotify as well as my YouTube channel, which is also where you'll find videos with audio that we can all chant along to, as well as Buddhist study videos with my take on various Goshos, as well as basics of Buddhism topics too. Before we start, I'd like to say a big thank you to all the people supporting me through my Nigel the Buddha Patreon account, because none of my content would be possible without you. Hi again, Buddhas. How are we all doing? Thank you so much for listening again. This is part 2 of this particular podcast episode. Part 1 was last month. I hope you've heard it. If not, go check it out. You might want to hear it before this one. I talked about the positive influences in my youth, as well as the negative ones, both of which lead me to the path to my first Soka Gakkai meeting. Okay, so it was late February 2006. That was the day of my first meeting. And to say I was nervous, well, that would be a massive understatement. Not as nervous I was the previous month though, when I made a phone call to the local district leader. I found the contact details for SGI-UK in the back of the book that I read. If you remember in part 1, it was The Buddha in Daily Life by Richard Corsten. And after thoroughly reading it, which took me 2 or 3 months I think, there were a few pages at the back of the book about the Soka Gakkai International. Even though I was utterly petrified, I really found it was something I wanted to explore. So sometime very early 2006, I called SGI-UK and got the details of my local district leader. I'll never forget my first meeting. I'm sure you won't either. I'm sure you remember it very clearly. The door opened to people in the kitchen, smoking, which I thought was weird since, well, they're Buddhists. Why are they smoking? And then throughout the meeting, people were swearing. And I thought, again, well, that's weird. They're Buddhists. Do Buddhists swear? That's weird. And even worse than that, I thought, there were people sharing their struggles? What? What's going on? What was that all about? Buddhists smoking? Don't be ridiculous. Buddhists swearing? I've never heard of it. And Buddhists suffering and struggling? Absolute rubbish. Well, I very quickly learnt that, well, that's why Richard Corsten's book was called The Buddha in Daily Life. Some Buddhists do indeed smoke in their daily lives. Some Buddhists do indeed smoke in their daily lives, eat meat, swear, get angry, cry, smile, struggle, all the things that non-Buddhists do in their daily life, well, so do Buddhists experience in their daily lives. We carry out our practice within society, don't we? We don't carry out our practice outside of society. I did understand this before I went to the meeting. I really did, but it's just that, well, maybe I thought, I'm not sure what I thought actually. I'm not sure. But there was one thing I did get definitely wrong, that I did misunderstand. Looking back, I can understand my mistake, but it still makes me laugh. We sat down, facing the Gohonzon, and the person leading the chanting was just about to bang the bell when they turned round and introduced me to the others that were there. You know the greetings, I'm sure. Let's all welcome the newbie. This is Nigel, everyone. This is his first meeting, etc., etc. And honestly, I was made to feel so welcome. It was lovely. Then someone gave me a card which said Nam Myoho Renge Kyo on it. That's what we chant, they said. Do you know how to chant? Because if not, we can chant slowly. Oh, no, it's okay. It's okay, thanks. I said, I've looked it up on the internet and I know how to chant, thanks. I'm fine with it. Chant at the speed you want, I'll be okay, I replied. Well, as it turned out, I actually hadn't done my research properly. As I mentioned earlier, back in those days, it was a very limited search. Google was, well, just a toddler back then, and YouTube was just a baby. Oh dear. I think I'm in danger of going on a nostalgia trip. Will you come with me? Are you of the age? Sorry, kids. It's gonna happen. Oh, those were the days. Technology was, well, it's come a long way since then, hasn't it? I think it was around 1984 or 85 when we even got our first home computer. The internet didn't exist back then, so we had no broadband or Wi-Fi. And if we wanted to watch a film or a TV program, we had to watch it when it was actually on television, when the company was broadcasting it. There was no streaming things, so we couldn't stream anything to catch up or play on demand. They weren't either of them. They just didn't exist. So I'm very happy that we've moved on from there. Oh, brilliant. Calm down, Nigel. So I was searching how to chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and then I found a very simple but actually very helpful page that just had the words, no video. I can't remember exactly what it said, but it was like lines of different colours with just instructions. Like, it said something like, you say Nam like you'd say ham. Oh, well, this is easy, I thought. And then further on it said, well, what I now know is you say Kyo like Tokyo. However, sorry, I apologise if this doesn't make you laugh, but it just makes me giggle so much thinking about it. We don't say Tokyo, we say Tokyo. So I presumed that said, you say Kyo like the end of Tokyo. And I thought, well, these are easy instructions. I'm all right with that. That's great. But of course, true to form, as someone with ADHD, I hadn't quite learnt it properly. Because when we started to chant at the meeting, my first meeting, and after saying, with confidence I might add, that I knew how to chant, I started chanting, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Totally out of time with everyone else, and I'm afraid to say it took me a few seconds to realise, oh boy, I felt such an idiot. So it was a good job then that I was with such a lovely bunch of people, and critically for me, a lovely bunch of non-judgmental people. So that was my first experience of chanting in a group. I of course corrected myself and was able to chant along, and no doubt my bright red face disappeared too. I can laugh at myself these days, but back then I would have felt so embarrassed. The discussion meeting itself was wonderful. I was asked what brought me to the meeting, and I of course mentioned my mental health, and that actually I felt I needed a belief system, like a philosophy, something that would help me in my mental health struggles. And they asked if I'll be chanting at home, and I said, well, yeah, I mean, I already have a Buddha figure at home. It's got a nice serene painting behind it, and I face that while I'm meditating, so from now on I'll just chant towards that rather than meditate. Well, I had it very strongly explained to me that this is not a good idea, because we are then chanting for an outside source to reveal my Buddhahood, and that actually Buddhahood comes from within. So I was encouraged to maybe chant to a blank wall. That would be a better idea. Another thing I remember was right at the end of the meeting, one of the men in the group came up to me and introduced himself to me. He asked if I had any questions or any doubts. He asked if the meeting was helpful to me. I don't actually remember my answer, but safe to say I had no doubts at all. But even if I could remember my answer, it's irrelevant, because the main point I'm making here is how utterly, amazingly supported I felt. I'd never been spoken to so compassionately by another man. It was like this person really cared that I was okay. I mentioned in part 1 that how much Howard Jones has had an effect on me in my life, especially in my youth. I didn't feel that my dad was that role model in my life, that rock that I needed. And because of that, because of how my dad treated me, I think I was quite wary of men, certainly wary of sharing my feelings with other men. So for this man to come to me and talk to me in such a compassionate way, I'll never forget that. That was so profound. Quite weird initially as well, because clearly I wasn't used to it, but it felt really good. It felt just so wonderful that I was valued and another man was treating me with such respect. But the gentleness, the kindness, the warm-heartedness, all of that, it was there all along, wasn't it? Howard Jones in 1983, he was showing me that men could indeed be gentle and kind. I had therapy recently where we talked about this, and my therapist suggested that maybe rather than focus on my dad not being the best role model for me, but to focus on Howard Jones being the positive role model. I could change that thought into, actually it's okay, as your pop idol can be that person, and it was a kind of release that I could think that way. So yeah, a kind, gentle man was always there for me. It reminds me a little of the parable in the Lotus Sutra about someone sewing a jewel into a poor man's robe. Do you know this? When he was asleep, a wealthy friend sewed a jewel into the lining of his robe, but without him knowing. He continued to live in poverty though, as he didn't know it was there, until later on when he saw his friend again. His friend was shocked that the man was still impoverished, so shows him the jewel. The man then realised for the first time that he had been walking around with this possession all along. It was always there. And of course he was overjoyed, probably very surprised, but overjoyed. And it reminds me of a track on Howard's Dream into Action album, and the track is called Why Look for the Key. The lyrics to the chorus go, "Why look for the key in another? The answer lay in his own heart. Won't find yourself in some other. It always was there right at the start." We chant Daimoku to manifest happiness from within, don't we? We don't go looking elsewhere for happiness, do we? We don't go looking to someone else to make us happy. I mean, that's just a recipe for disaster. Do you remember in part 1 of this podcast I mentioned the song Hide and Seek? That is my favourite song of all time. And I said that this podcast title, and his words were these, is a line from that song. Well, it leads into the chorus that goes, "Hope you find it in everything that you see." And so many of Howard's lyrics are like this. So you could say that Howard and his lyrics have had and still have enabled me to feel hope, not just in my youth, but actually all throughout my life, especially when I've felt anything but hope. Sensei says this about hope. Hope transforms pessimism into optimism. Hope is invincible. Hope changes everything. It changes winter into summer, darkness into dawn, descent into ascent, barrenness into creativity, agony into joy. Hope is the sun. It is light. It is passion. It is the fundamental force for life's blossoming. So that's my experience. And even though I've rambled on so much that I've felt the need to divide this episode into 2 parts, I really hope I've given you some sort of inspiration, some form of inspiration. Yes, I do talk about my mental health a lot. If that's your thinking, I agree. But I do so only to inspire others that are maybe going through similar. And it's so important to understand that there is no poison that cannot be turned into medicine. Looking back on my life, I can honestly say that absolutely everything has been of benefit. Even when I go through such terrible depression, I not only feel joy, but also, and maybe bizarrely, I know it's of benefit. As Sensei says, the darker the night, the nearer the dawn. You have been listening to What's Your Favourite Cake, a monthly podcast about how I use Buddhism in my life. Come chant with me on my YouTube channel when I go live, and check out my Inspirational Quote video shorts too. Thank you so much for your support.